I'm the author Jonathan Digby, and this is Pippa and welcome to the first of my blogs on Elizabethan London, which I'm going to run a series of in order to support my novel A Murderous Affair, which is a Elizabethan crime novel. Cuckold's Point was a rather strange phenomenon. It was a pole that was situated on the shoreline, a long tall pole which had a set of antlers capped on its crown, and this was the universal symbol of the cuckold. Cuckold being the Elizabethan word for a husband whose wife is unfaithful. And so this rather strange object was situated on the banks of the Thames, and where we are now, this is where there's a bend in the river. Behind me, curves to the left and goes down towards Greenwich, which is where Queen Elizabeth had one of her most glorious and one of her most favourite palaces. Boats coming in behind me, we're coming in from Greenwich, a lot of foreign travellers who've come to London for the first time would come up the river here, and one of the first things they would see on their left would be this strange object, which was kind of standing in the landscape. It's very built up now, but 400 years ago this was just a beach running up to sort of marshy ground. Rotherhithe village was behind me, maybe about half a mile in that direction. So they'd see this strange totem pole type object, a pole with these antlers on it. So in my novel A Murderous Affair, the body of the Portuguese merchant Don Alfonso de Sousa washes up here, right by Cuckold's Point. And when I was writing the novel at first, I always wanted the body to kind of be washed down the Thames. And Don Alfonso is a bit of a womanizer in the novel, but I had no idea that the area where I pinpointed him to be fished out of the Thames was called Cuckold's Point, and there actually was a landmark here to Cuckold. So that was a very nice coincidence, which kind of, I guess, told me I was on the right track. It was a positive sign. So what has happened in the novel is the body has kind of washed away from up in the city, and been carried by the tide to be kind of washed up here, and is discovered by a group of men from Rotherhithe village who are members of the Watch, and the Watch was a kind of feature of Elizabethan society because they were looking for spies or priests who were kind of infiltrating into the country, and their job was to kind of catch them at it. In the Elizabethan day, this river would have been quite busy. For a start, you had kind of local fishermen on both sides of the river who would have been kind of setting out from here. You also had big merchantmen, ships that had been sort of travelling abroad. So why was it here? Well, I don't think anyone actually knows the answer to that, but there are a couple of legends around why it was here. One legend is that the King of England, King John, was on his way back from a trip. Either he'd been abroad or he was on a hunting trip or something, and he chanced upon this miller's wife who was on her own, and he took advantage of her. The miller returned to find his wife in bed with the King of England, and what happened was, as recompense, the king said to the miller that he could have the land as far as could be seen from Charlton, which is where the miller lived, all the way to the Thames. The one condition that the king laid on his gift was that the miller had to erect this monument to the cuckold, and just to remind everybody that the king had stayed with his wife, which I guess he was probably happy to do, as it meant gaining all this property in the process, but he would have had that hanging over for the rest of his life. That's one idea. I think it's an apocryphal story. I don't think it's true. I think a more realistic story is that it was actually the symbol of a pagan symbol which marked the beginning of the Horn Fair. And the Horn Fair was this carnival which took place in this part of East London. We don't know when it began. Very likely it had kind of pagan origins, but it was certainly very popular during the 17th century, the 18th century. In fact, it got very, very rowdy. I think that's probably a more likely story. And one of the other things that supports that is that behind me here, where the river bends round, on the other side is the Isle of Dogs, which is the sort of the U-bend, if you like, in the River Thames, if you look at a map. And that area was associated 2,000 years more ago with kind of pagan rituals before Christianity came to these shores. So I think that for me is a likely a possible reason why this point was Cuckold's Point, or why it was a pagan site. And one of the great things about the Thames shoreline is it's actually somewhere where a lot of artefacts from the past wash up. I was actually at university doing archaeology at UCL, and I don't know if they still do, but they used to have a program where once or twice a year they would come walking along the beach and looking for artefacts. And they would find things from thousands of years ago right through up to the Victorian period. There's a whole range of London history dotted along the beach, and as you can see behind me, there's the modern history there with a lovely shopping trolley deposited above the shoreline there. So it continues. So now Pippi and I are going to do a bit of beach combing along this stretch of the shore and see if we can find some ancient artefacts. A lot of things wash up on the banks of the Thames, so we're going to have a look. It's like a truffle hound. Come on, come on. One thing I just wanted to mention is the idea of the cuckold, which is this very Elizabethan idea, I think. And really what it says to me is the onus is on the husband who's actually being cuckolded, who's being cheated on. In modern day we tend very much to kind of lay the blame on infidelity with the woman. She's a tart, she's a whore, whatever. In the Elizabethan day there was much more fun played around the idea of the guy who's cuckolded. The wife or the unfaithful woman is not seen in quite the same way that we sort of demonise them these days, and I do quite love that sort of playfulness. And I think going back to the legend about King John cuckolding the miller, he did give him quite a big area of land as recompense, but at the same time the miller had to erect a monument saying there, I've been cuckolded, I'm wearing the stag's antlers to show that I'm a cuckold, which is the whole idea of the antlers on top of the pole. There are lots of references to cuckolds and cuckoldry in Jacobean and Elizabethan plays. So, in particular, Shakespeare, Ben Jonson. In fact, Ben Jonson is the only playwright I know of who actually mentions Cuckold's Point, although he calls it Cuckold's Haven, which was also another name for Cuckold's Point. And one of his characters, a character called Slitgut, is actually up the top of the pole commenting on events that are happening on the river, and at one point some other characters get washed up and they meet him. Just to emphasise just that whole idea of cuckoldry, I think we've lost that in today's society. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed my first blog. I've certainly enjoyed making it. Pip has had an absolute blast digging away on the beach here. I think it's the first time he's seen sand. So come back next time. I think I'm going to do something more in the city, and I'm not sure yet. It might be on the Gresham's Exchange or Old London Bridge, or one of these other lost landmarks of Elizabethan London. So come and join me again next time.